What's up, everyone? My name's Doc, and today we are going over some ESO hot takes. Basically, the idea is that we will be reading some opinions online that could be seen as less than popular, or just maybe a controversial topic to discuss about the subject. Though I tend to find, honestly, that a lot of these hot takes, quote unquote, end up being pretty popular, well supported opinions. Though I will say, I will try my best to find some real spicy ones. Before we get started, I want to point out that many of these, actually, all of these, were posted a while ago. They're all in the same Reddit thread, and I will link that Reddit thread in the description. However, I think that you'll find, though, and I thought it was interesting, that all of these that I'm going to go over with you today are still relevant to this day, and most of them are still talked about. I figured I'd just read through them, give my thoughts. You guys can tell me what you think down below as well. I might agree, I might disagree, I might even have a couple hot takes of my own. So, y'all just sit back, relax, and let's get into some ESO hot takes. So starting at number 1, we have having to buy mounts instead of getting them in-game from achievements just sucks. While there are a few mounts that you can actually get through in-game achievements, I do mostly agree with this. I'm not sure if they're referring to just the mounts that you have to buy directly from the Crown Store, or if they're also referring to the ones that are available through DLCs. I can say that I've never bought a mount directly, and I still have a ton of them. I also do have all of the chapters and DLCs, though, and a lot of these, bundles and whatnot include mounts. So, yeah, could go either way depending on what they mean. Either way, though, I will say I do completely agree that more in-game rewards to work for will always be a good thing, and I'd love to see more Crown Store items available through gameplay. Maybe, if nothing else, maybe a way to slowly earn crowns in-game could be a solution as well. I'd totally support that. Number 2. Sitting in zone shouting for a tank or healer is an archaic MMO feature that only existed because the quality of life of a duty finder wasn't established yet. Anyone who thinks it's good game design is blinded by nostalgia. While I don't think that it's necessarily nostalgia that leads players to dislike group finders and matchmaking, I do still agree that those things are much more of a positive than a negative. This take was actually posted before the group finder was implemented, so I'm sure that guy's probably pretty happy right about now. But matchmaking in the group finder is still a topic of discussion, not just within ESO, but also within the larger MMO community. The whole idea is, do group finders and matchmaking take away from the social aspect of MMOs? Personally, my answer is no, it doesn't. I never saw shouting LFG in zone chat, specifically Craglorn, to be a very social thing anyway. Sure, you're typing in chat, but can you really say that typing LFG over and over in zone chat is socializing? Because I wouldn't. It's the equivalent of standing up on a stage and shouting at people with a megaphone. I think group finders and matchmaking are a positive quality of life change, and they had very minimal impact on how much players were actually conversing with each other. Next, we have a couple that I paired together just to talk about at the same time. Number 3, Overland difficulty does not need to be universally increased. They should instead implement a harder veteran Overland. And number 4, let people who are average at the game have fun being average at the game, especially because the vast majority of players are bad at the game by top tier standards. Making 10% happy at the expense of 50% isn't just bad game design, it's bad business. Honestly, there is not a single thing here that I don't agree with. The problem that we'll tend to see with most MMOs, and honestly a lot of other games in general, like looter shooters and stuff like that, there are two extremes of players. Those who are soloing the hardest content in the game effortlessly and putting more hours into this game than most people put into their jobs. There are also those who struggle with anything above story content and actively avoid doing any group content whatsoever. There's also plenty of people in between those two extremes. They could never, and I mean ever, perfectly balance Overland to be challenging but not too challenging for everyone, because those two extremes of players will always exist. I do think a vet Overland would work just fine, but I also don't fully understand the work that would actually go into implementing that. Zoss has kind of talked about it a little bit, and I don't personally, I'm not a game designer, right? So I cannot say with 100% certainty how easy or difficult that would be. You guys tell me about it in the comments down below if you think that this would be a very easy thing or a very difficult thing. Number 5. Tanking in this game is miserable compared to other MMOs, and that is why there will always be a tank shortage. Give tanks more damage, it's pathetic. I almost completely agreed with this. I really wanted to agree with this, but there's the last part. The last part is what I don't agree with. Tanks tend to be a pretty underplayed role in all games, but I do think that ESO does have it a bit worse comparatively. Normally, healers and tanks tend to be a bit closer, but tanks seem to be pretty far and away the least played role. Now, I am a healer, but I have dabbled in tanking some dungeons and a few trials. From my perspective, I truly do not think that it's that tanks don't do enough damage. I have always subscribed to the idea that tanks should tank, healers should heal. If I wanted to do damage, I would be a DPS. Tanks and healers have their own unique role identity that shouldn't be taken away from them just to give them more damage. Of course, I'm not trying at all to say that tanks and healers should do 0 damage. They should absolutely contribute to group DPS, but it's more so to say that roles begin to lose their identity when we make every role capable of doing everything on a similar level to one another. I personally believe that the reason tanking isn't as enjoyable is that, firstly, there's just far too much pressure on tanks. If the tank messes up, the group wipes 90% of the time, maybe even more. And there's very little room for recovering from mistakes when you're a tank. Because of all the one-shots in the game, if a tank messes up their block and then they get hit with a one-shot, they die instantly. And because of that, then the group wipes. And a lot of people simply don't want to deal with that pressure. So instead they'll play DPS or healer, which is comparatively a less stressful role. The other reason that I think tanking isn't as fun. The lack of an AoE taunt and the lower than average actions per minute that's required for tanks due to the amount of blocking they have to do can make the role feel rather tedious to play. So how do you fix it? I'm not a tank expert, so someone can tell me if this is a bad take, but here's my idea. There should be less attacks that do large, quick burst damage, and more attacks that instead do persistent, unblockable, middling damage. That way, tanks don't have to spend as much time blocking, and it will shift a bit of the pressure from tanks onto healers. Okay, I think I rambled enough about that topic. Let's just go ahead and move on. Number 6. Having to bid for guild traders is abusive. Just have the auction house like other MMOs so everyone can sell their goods, and you don't have to waste an entire day traveling the frickin' world visiting the different vendors to find what you need. Yeah, I mostly agree with this one. Don't get me wrong, Tamriel Trade Center is a tremendous help in finding the things that you need in guild traders. However, TTC isn't something that's obvious to the majority of players. Most players, well, I don't know if I'd say most, but I'd say at least a significant portion of the player population most likely does not know that TTC exists, and that's because no one has told them about it. So, if they don't have it, it's much more difficult. While I do think, though, it is a little too late to implement the central auction house at this point in the game, I do think that it is better for MMOs than the guild trader system of ESO. Again, I don't think it's happening. I don't think that they're going to be able to do it. But, hey, if there ever comes a day in the distant future where we see an ESO 2, someone do me a favor. Show Zoss this part of the video so that they can put in the auction house and we'll see how it goes. And finally, we have a couple healing hot takes because, we're all about healing on this channel. So, of course, we got to talk about it. So, number 7, healing in ESO feels bad because you are only allowed to heal in a competent group in like 0.1% of content. I want to specify there that the key phrase is in a competent group. The idea is that in a group that is very optimized in 4-man content and even in some trials, you do not need healers because the self-healing and tanking should be good enough that players are not taking enough damage to require a dedicated healer. And number 8, healing is way too powerful across the board for players that aren't healers and haven't invested anything in healing. I'm sure you probably could have guessed that this one was coming. I wish I could disagree with this, but honestly, it's the truth. I love ESO. I love healing. I just wish that ESO loved healing. While I do think that 0.1% is maybe a bit of an exaggeration, the unfortunate truth is that there is just a lot of content in this game where being an actual healer is actively discouraged by the community. I've got a billion things to say about this topic, but I'm not going to linger too much on it because I honestly plan on making an entire video over this exact topic at some point. But yeah, man, it sucks. It sucks that it's true, I don't want to be negative about it. Don't get me wrong. I still love healing in ESO, and I still love healing, and I love all of my games and healing in them. But I will say I wish that healing was more impactful or necessary in some of these games. I hate to end the last one on a negative note like that, but I tend to save healing things for last, and what more of a hot take could you ask for than the one that talks about how healers aren't even needed for some content? Otherwise, though, I think that about covers the ESO hot takes for the day. I hope y'all enjoyed the video. I'll make sure to link this Reddit post I got these from in the description so you can go read them yourselves if you'd like. I do stream as well, so feel free to click on the link in the description if you'd like to come hang out with your favorite healer. Otherwise, though, I have been Doc. Take care of yourselves, be good to others, leave your own ESO hot takes in the comments, and I will catch y'all in the next one.